One of the things, Commissioner, that is concerning to me has been where exactly you talked about it. One of the biggest things you and I have talked about in the past. Where are we at with education? I've been a real supporter of the reform that we're seeing in our correction system as far as early release and things like that. But I am concerned, as you and I have talked about in the past, about the importance of education. These people getting a GED or some kind of an education, because I believe recidivism is usually based upon somebody not being able to get a job because they can't read or write and do the things they need to get a job. So where are we at with that in our system? Because to me, education is very critical.
Yeah, we have a lot of people participating, both vocational ed and GED, high school diploma. Matter of fact, we did over 400 GEDs last year, and we usually are around that level. We also get folks diplomas from their high school if possible. We're also one of the states that are part of the Pell experiment. Actually, it was started by the Obama administration. The Trump administration just extended it for another year, where we're able to provide higher ed funded by Pell grants for inmates getting out in the next 5 years. And nationally, it's kind of one of the next steps they're looking for as far as federal reform. And actually, we have 6 universities in Pennsylvania that provide that higher ed, and we're looking to expand that, trying to find some creative ways to fund that, to couple with the Pell. But IUP, Bloomsburg, Villanova, and Lehigh Carbon Community College, actually it's 4 universities participating in that Pell at 6 different prison sites. And we look to expand that. The vocational stuff, we're really moving forward in that area. As I said, we're partnering, we got a $1 million federal grant to look at partnering with groups like community colleges to figure out what the needs are, what the workforce needs are by area where someone's getting out, and then working to put vocational programs in place to do that. I'll just touch on one that's really an exciting, that we're not quite there yet, but we're looking to train inmates in wastewater treatment. The average person working that is over the age of 55. No judgment on what that means, other than folks are going to be retiring soon, and there's a huge need. So working with the associations to figure out what's the profile of an individual who could actually get a job given their criminal background, what criminal background is acceptable to go in this program. And then we'll partner with a community college to actually provide that training. So we're all on board as far as education, trying to be creative, and also advocating on the federal level to take a look. I mean, one of the Pell experiment is to see does higher ed have a positive impact on recidivism, and we all believe it does.
The last thing, just as a comment to you, is real concern about $90 million in overtime. I understand this year with your cost overruns and why that is. But to me, as a former private businessman and having worked for a company as well, we had overtime at times, but it just seems to me like $90 million in overtime is not a good thing to be going, whether it's the safety of the guards or whatever. To me, the longer and more overtime, we talk about safety of nurses even in hospitals, that when you work a certain amount of hours in a week's time, you kind of forget things, leave things go. So it's a concern I have for the safety. When you have $90 million, that seems like a lot. There should be a better way of fixing that we can get those costs down a lot lower.
Yeah, in some ways there are. I mean, there's some things that are unplanned trips that we don't want staff like waiting around to see if someone has to go out to the hospital. But we can always do better on controlling. But I would really encourage you to look at the number of hours. So the number of hours has gone down. And if we're going to compare over 10 years, let's adjust for inflation and adjust for salary increases. I think the hours tell a bigger story, but we can always do better and get more efficient.
Like I said, $90 million seems like a lot, and I think for taxpayers that sounds like, well, why that high? But if we can continue looking at how we can reduce those, I don't expect that overtime is going to go away, but I think there's got to be a better way of protecting our guards as well as everybody else in the correction system by trying to get those numbers down so we have more reasonable hours.
Just one follow-up to that. $90 million out of about $2 billion in personnel expenditures. So again,
I understand.
From a percentage standpoint,
I don't argue. I'm not the expert in it, so I'm just saying. I'm just
trying to contextualize the conversation.
Yeah, I do have some concern for the guards and anybody else. I get very upset sometimes when I think that with companies, private industry, where people who are working in their companies are overworked and not able to spend time with families and things like that. To me, it's important that that we're making sure that's happening, and I'm assuming you are.
I agree with that. And we
Okay.
mandatory overtime is 11% of our overall
Very
overtime.
good.
So.
Now, Judge, or of course, Mr. Steele, the last question I have really has to do with juvenile probation. Representative Gainey and I were talking up here again. It comes to education. But, you know, the dollars that we send out to the counties for juvenile probation services, are we monitoring what they're doing to make sure that they're in the best way possible spending those dollars to make sure that our recidivism rate in that area is as low as possible and we're doing the right things with those dollars?
Want to start that, Rick? Rick's going to start.
Thank you. That's a very good question, and one of the things that we've been really working on over the past number of years is assuring that there are certain conditions around allocating those dollars to the counties. So Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system is in the midst of one of the most comprehensive juvenile justice reform efforts nationally. Very well known, very well along. We also understand that counties, depending on the size, their location, what their resources are, their implementation of this plan we've put together can change from county to county. And so on a yearly basis, in order to become eligible for their grants, there's a survey that they must complete about where they are in terms of implementing the juvenile justice system enhancement strategy, and they have to commit to an implementation plan that's approved by our commission prior to receiving the money. So there are other conditions of the allocation of that funding as well, but probably to get to your point, how are we measuring change? We do that on a yearly basis, both county-specific as well as statewide.
So go ahead, Judge.
I was just going to say we have very good data that's collected by the Juvenile Court Judges Commission. Counties are mandated to report their data to the commission. We have a good system to collect that data in a uniform manner so that counties are reporting the same data in the same fashion. Reports are issued annually about the outcome data for juvenile cases. In Pennsylvania, it's on the Juvenile Court Judges Commission website, but it's also published in hard copy if you want copies of that. And we also have recidivism data where when did we first start doing that?
Our base was 2007 through 2010.
And so we first made a definition of what we wanted recidivism to be. And over the course of those years, we have collected and then published annually the recidivism data in Pennsylvania, which it gives us really good marks in terms of recidivism. It certainly could be better because anything can be better. If it's not 100% non-recidivism, then it could always be better. That information is also available on the JCJC's website. In addition, there are many training opportunities for juvenile probation departments, juvenile probation officers and juvenile judges and hearing officers as well through the statewide conference on juvenile justice. And as you know, the master's program for juvenile probation officers that is sponsored by the commission through Shippensburg University.
So the funds that are going out are based upon performance measures. Is that what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Steele? The way you allocate dollars, or it is so much per county?
Well, the allocation kind of has been set for quite a number of years. It isn't so much that it raises or lowers, but there are expectations in order to qualify for the annual allocation that must be in place.
In doing so, if you improve to meet the standards or go, is there any increase in funding?
We have not had the ability to do that for a number of years. As you're probably aware, our allocation base has been stagnant for probably 6 or 7 years, so it's difficult. We want to kind of have a hold harmless piece for that allocation. We are interested at some point, maybe down the road, looking at a way to reinvest some of the savings that we've seen through reducing our use of institutional care for juveniles. We've had some very significant savings over the past 10 years or so. We would like to see if there's somehow we could reinvest and then use that as an incentive fund for counties to improve their services even more.
Very good.